Welcome to the Meez Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Sharkey, the founder and CEO of Meez, the culinary operating system for food professionals. On the show, I'll be interviewing world-class entrepreneurs in the food space that are shifting the paradigm of how we innovate and operate in our industry. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the show.
Yo, they say art mirrors life with every stroke of the pencil. I'm giving you folks a glimpse in.
Our guest today has created one of the most ubiquitous technologies in the hospitality industry, one that you've definitely interacted with multiple times and may not have even known. Krystle Mobayeni is the CEO and co-founder of BentoBox, the digital platform transforming restaurants into better businesses online. First and foremost, the platform allows restaurants to quickly build websites with all the functionality that we need to run the digital side of our business, from online ordering, gift cards, SEO, to a lot more. Krystle founded BentoBox back in 2013 when she was building websites for restaurants like Momofuku and the Meatball Shop and Breslin. And back then, I don't know if you remember, but it was a pain in the butt to get a website built. You'd have to hire a web designer and a web developer, and you do it usually on something like WordPress. And then you'd have to have that same person or somebody maintaining it over time. And BentoBox solved this much of the same way that Shopify was solving it on the e-commerce side. But of course, BentoBox focused on all the needs of restaurants and also sort of leveraging Krystle's design background to make sure that the sites were not just really functional, but also really beautiful. Fast forward 10 years later, and the company serves, I think, over 14,000 restaurants and growing, and they have a considerable number of new products. And, I've had the pleasure of getting to know Krystle over the last couple of years, and I really admire what she's built. So we spent a lot of today just sort of picking her brain about how she's built this really successful company, from, leadership and hiring to building great culture, how to iterate quickly and using sort of design thinking. BentoBox was recently acquired by Fiserv. And when you hear Krystle talk about the future of the company, it's really clear that the acquisition is just helping her supercharge her vision. So I had a blast. And as always, I hope that you enjoy as much as I did. We're live, so welcome to the podcast. I'm so freaking excited to have you here. So thank you for taking some time. You've done a bunch of these talks already, so I'm not going to have you go through the whole rigmarole of a lot of the stuff that you've already talked about with your background. I think I'll share a little bit because I think people, if they don't know, they probably should know. I think everybody listening probably knows about BentoBox already. I love that you have a design background and then became a founder. Obviously, you were a designer for like 10 years. And then you started your own design agency. And I think that's how you started getting into what became BentoBox, because you were working with USHG. And I think Momofuku was your first technical client.
Mm-hmm. And it was the first restaurant website I ever did was Momofuku's. BentoBox didn't exist then. It was just...
Oh, gotcha. Under the guise of your previous. That was like, was it called Neon & Sons? Was that your agency?
Yeah.
Cool. And obviously you've won a bunch of awards, and you're just, I think, Krystle, you probably know, but you're incredibly well respected in the industry. And I'm just like, well, I'm going to be taking advantage of this time to just, get some advice like I always do from you and learn, and everybody else will along the way. But just things like, I think you got Game Changer from Food and Wine and Female Founders 100 List from Inc. So you've gotten all of those accolades, but you've most importantly built an incredible company, and a word that is just, I think we all aspire for, which is, it's like ubiquitous in the restaurant industry, BentoBox. So, and you were recently acquired by Fiserv. So I'd love to dig into a little bit of how that's going. What I didn't know until I did a little digging was I didn't realize that you're first generation American born and your parents are immigrated from Iran. We just had Nilu Motzman on the podcast a couple weeks ago.
Amazing.
And talked a lot about that. Her parents obviously left a little later than yours in 1979. So kind of like at the heat of the revolution.
Period. Yeah.
But I didn't realize that was a part of your background as well. So I think to kick things off, before we get into bento and all that jazz, where do you get good Persian food?
Yeah.
Other than probably at home.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, nothing compares to that. And for a long time in New York, I thought it was very difficult to get good Persian food. There was like a couple places, and they're really not even worth mentioning. But several years ago, one spot opened in Brooklyn called Sofre, which, you know that one? Mm-hmm. Good. So good. And it's a little bit like there's a little bit of a twist on the Persian food that they do. It's got like some modern vibes, but the flavors are all there, and I love it. And they opened another spot called Abel. Yeah, that's the place I would recommend in New York. I think there's outside of New York, there's a lot of options, but New York, there aren't that many.
No, there isn't. There's some good ingredients. Persian food's very ingredient driven. Have you ever had the white mustache yogurt?
No.
Oh my God.
I have heard about this. Somebody else, I think, told me about this.
It's insanely good, especially the sour cherry one, which is sour cherries in Persian cuisine. And then I think there's a date one that's really good.
Yeah.
It's really, really good.
Yeah, a little fun fact with sour cherries. When I was a kid, there was this orchard nearby. You could go apple picking and they would have pick your own thing. They had sour cherries. And we would go every summer, we'd go and it was sour cherry season. We'd go and pick tons of sour cherries, and they're not, as a kid especially, they're not that good to eat on its own. It's mostly used for cooking and stuff. And my dad would get a big handle of vodka and he would put all the sour cherries in there and let it sit for however long. And that was his thing. It was people would come over and he'd give them sour cherry vodka. Yeah. And then as I started getting old enough, when I was poking around there, I would, in my teenage years, take some of the sour. You could just eat the sour cherries that were just filled with vodka. It was taking a shot. It was fun. I don't think he even knows that. So sorry, Dad.
Yeah, well, maybe he'll find out now. There's also a pretty famous rice with sour cherries, right?
Yeah.
Where did you grow up, by the way?
In Maryland, outside of DC.
Oh, really? What part?
Potomac, Rockville, Montgomery County area. Yeah. You're familiar with that area?
I grew up in Northern Virginia and spent a lot of time in Maryland. So
yeah. So that's probably how you know so much about Persians, because there's a lot there. There's a lot of Persian food there, especially Northern Virginia.
Yeah, a lot in Northern Virginia, and that, and Old Bay and crabs.
I love crabs.
Yeah, I know. I still my dad was an attorney, and then he turned into a salesman. He sold nuts and candies and things. We would have to go to Bethesda every week to pick up the haul, of all the. I worked for this company called Barcelona Nuts. It was in Bethesda, was the warehouse. And he would always take me for sheet crab soup and things around there. There's nothing like crab stuff you get in Maryland.
So good.
Yeah.
So much fun.
I promise we're going to get the bento box, but you have 2 kids now. How old are they?
I have a daughter who's 3, a little over 3, and I just had a son. And so he's 5 months.
Oh, so you're in the weeds.
We're in it. It's tough. It's really tough, you know?
Yeah. It's no joke.
We have plenty of help, but it's, the guilt. I'm not working, or sleeping. I have to be spending time with my kids, but they're fine. But I just feel it's full on.
I have 2 kids. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And every waking moment that I'm not working on my business, I'm with them. It's tough. There is that sense of guilt when you're not, when you're not with them.
Yeah.
So you're now 10 years in. BentoBox was founded in 2013 and you started in the company before that. Could you imagine what would it be like today with having these 2 kids?
I don't know how you're doing it. The way that I was working from 2013 to 2020 before my daughter was born, it was all the time, all week. It was just, didn't have to be home at a certain time. Stay at the office till 9 p.m. if I wanted to. I get my best work done really early in the morning, 5, 6 a.m. That's out the window.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a lot of respect for you and other people who are able to do both simultaneously. It's so hard. It's
hard regardless. And obviously with the startup, it definitely makes it doubly hard. I want a support group for it. I don't know any way around it. You wake up at 5, you try to get some work done. You never know when the kid's going to wake up. Might be 6, might be 5:30, might be 6:30.
Yep.
Work till they have dinner time, do dinner with them, 7:30, go back to work, do that all over till, midnight. It's a grind.
It's a grind. How do you balance the 2?
I'll be honest. It's a struggle. I feel like I'm just in a constant state of this is just the madness that it is. And I have almost had to kind of accept it. The harder part, honestly, is, with my wife is I want to be sensitive to, I also have a wife. So whenever, when it is the kids and the business and then, we should have a date night and I should spend some time with her, when work is quote unquote done for the day. And it's tough. Yeah, it's tough. I think the benefit is, this better than anybody is with a startup. it's just, there's never like a time where you're like, oh yeah, now I'm good. Now I can step back and it's all good now. It's just a constant, roller coaster of ups and downs, and you just have to be okay with all of them.
Totally.
Having kids helps to have give you a little bit more perspective around, we're going to make this work. It's all good. But I also have, this other part of life that's really important. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah.
As a parent now, being a child of immigrants and you being an entrepreneur and starting companies, and like, how do you think about, they're still young, so you're not like, giving them the talk about life, but do you think about that now? Like, does it affect how you parent?
Yeah. I had this like immense pressure to like make good on like the opportunities that were created for me. And I watched, my parents both work so hard. And I really I really want that same struggle and that same pressure for my kids, because it really, profoundly impacted how I approach life. But I'm like, man, are they going to have it too easy? They're not going to know, Yeah. So I don't know the right ways to instill those values. My husband and I talk a lot about being like deliberate about values and like writing them down and then really making sure we like talk about them and create rituals and practices and ways we communicate that really reflects like these values. We're not that far into it yet, but I think that's one way that we're trying to make sure that how we may be lucky enough to live our life now doesn't become like the value system. The value system is just much more deliberate. Yeah. So it's definitely something I think about a lot.
Yeah. Like, how do you build resilience when it's not organically forced upon someone, I think about like in the kitchens, we used to just work 100-hour weeks and shift pay. And that's just what it was. You were forced to sort of, grind it out. It's different now. And I think about, as a parent, my kids have way more than I had. And your kids definitely did it as well. And do you ever just think about like, what? I could give them this. No, I'm just not. I'm not going to.
Yeah, it's so hard. I think we definitely try to put some boundaries in place. I feel like you have to just do it through and through. You can't just like put it on the kids, and then you're living one way and like putting some other set of expectations on your kids. So, I think that's where just being like deliberate about how you want to raise your kids and then making decisions that like reflect that is something we're trying to do. I can't say we're fully doing it yet, but we're trying it.
Yeah.
But you have the advantage, like at 2 and 4, are they playing with each other and keeping each other company?
Started. That literally started like 2 months ago, and holy shit, it's like a game changer, because you can actually walk away for 5 seconds. They'll start fighting eventually, but it's a game changer. Where you're at right now is kind of the hardest because you're just on double duty all the time, and you can't you can't like put down, you can't walk away, and it's really hard. Yeah, totally. Well, it sounds like you and your husband are a really good team. I watched a talk you did with First Mark, really incredible investors, and you mentioned that he's one of your biggest inspirations. I think we're an amazing team, and I feel like I don't think I could have done the stuff that I did with just anyone. From the perspective of like, he was just very supportive and like genuinely wanted me to like succeed and be great. He really wanted me to be great at any cost, like to his detriment, whatever it was. Like, and I think that was having someone like that in my life was just so important. Yeah, especially if you're building a company and a company like Bento, it's almost like it's hard to do it without that. Yeah. And he's an investor now, but he had built a company too. So he also knew, he knew what it took. So I'm very grateful for that. You mentioned a couple other like companies that were inspirations for you. And by the way, and this isn't just lip service, and obviously we've talked before, but BentoBox was a huge inspiration for me in that you've created sort of a medium for the industry that is, it's sort of bigger than itself. Like BentoBox it's not about BentoBox. It's about the medium that you created for all of these other restaurants. And you took inspiration from Shopify and Mindbody, which also are incredible companies. Do you find that there's parts of BentoBox that you took away from learnings from those companies? And also why? Why did those companies inspire you?
And I think that at the time, they both felt like very customer focused companies, like the customer above all else. And I think that that's something that I really respected and really tried to instill in BentoBox. And then Shopify, I've always been particularly drawn to like product engineering, design led kind of companies. And Shopify founder and CEO is an engineer. And I like read something once about him where he wanted something built and, some engineer like quoted, "Oh, it's going to take this amount of time." And he's like, I'll just do it myself. The reason it was quoted was in a negative way. But when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, I like totally relate to that. Like sometimes I'm just like, I'll just do it. And it might seem annoying to employees, but it's the work that I love to do, that I used to do, that I love to do. So it's actually a great pleasure. But I do feel like having that like product and engineering and design DNA is really important and really drove a lot of our success. And I think that's why,
Yeah.
I look to these companies.
Toby Luke's an incredible founder. I think he just keeps like surprising people and he's definitely inspiring. I'm going to jump around a bit because you talked about sort of your product background and design. And I'm curious if you think about design methodology to like design thinking in, or even something like Kaizen or something in the way that you run your business.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I don't even think, and it's so unintentional. I just think that like it's just how I'm wired, so I don't even think it's like we need to bring the design thing into how we, do customer support or how we like approach how we talk about our products from a marketing perspective. It's just so ingrained into like everything we do, how we like break problems down into parts, how we really focus on. I think design is so just about eliciting a certain response or behavior or feeling or from people. That's a lot of what design is. Like, how do you like create an experience that like gives you the response or meets the need of this person? And I think that level of focus is something that we have in everything that we do, from like how we build the product, how we communicate about it, to how we, support our customers. But it's big. It's a big part. It's just so ingrained that it's really hard for me to even pick out the things that I may do or I may have put into place, because it is like everything, is how everything is run.
Obviously, there's a cycle to it. Maybe for those who don't know, like whether it's design thinking or the Kaizen approach, you have like empathize or getting feedback and then processing that and ideating on it, prototyping, testing, and then just continually getting feedback. I think that the thing that's hardest, I find, in that whole sort of test, iterate, improve, test, get feedback, test, is the feedback part. Like, how do you process feedback? And BentoBox, like Shopify, is also really customer focused, really customer driven. I'm curious if you have like techniques or tactics that you guys use to process customer feedback and to use that to sort of normalize all the insights you get to like create better product.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think like one thing that we do kind of often when we get feedback is a lot of times feedback will come in the form of, I want this, or I need this, or this would be better. And when we get that feedback, like not just trying to get a few layers deeper, but what is the actual problem? Like what is, because there may be different approaches to how we solve the actual problem that like meet the needs of more customers or restaurants, or solve multiple issues at once versus just focusing on just the surface of this customer said they wanted this. So now we are going to, or a bunch of customers are saying, a similar thing. So we're just going to do that. So it's really getting like digging deeper and asking why and asking the questions until you really get to like the core of what is the problem. And a lot of times it's funny with restaurants, because restaurants are such complex operations. so many times we'll find that it's less the technology is a problem, but it's like the way either the operations or the way the technology is being used or the way it's just like that they've always done something, And so you can actually help solve the problem without, it's not like a technology problem necessarily.
Yeah.
So that's always been really interesting. And I think we've had some like aha moments with a lot of restaurants we've worked with and uncovering that.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the most fun things I've been able to experience jumping from, cooking into tech is there's so much iteration to it, but solving the problem is never like a surface level as you think. To your point, you get all these suggestions. Most people don't actually know the root problem that they're trying to communicate. They just have here's what's happening today. So can you fix this for me? And you have to sort of do the 5 whys of getting to the bottom of it. But it's so cool when you do. BentoBox now, it started as sort of like, I call it like the digital storefront for restaurants. Yeah. Obviously, it's a website, but so many other things. Yeah. Now, I don't even know all the products that you guys have. There's so many of them.
I barely know.
But like, how do you think about what products to add? Obviously, that must be partly because customers like, hey, I need reservations. I want you to order online. I know some of it is clearly just market driven. COVID happens and people need better ways to, to sell product online. But do you have any kind of ways in which you think about how do you prioritize what products to build or to buy or?
Yeah, I think we go and lean always back to our like mission and vision. And the vision is to really elevate every touch point between the restaurant and the guest, or be the technology that elevates every touch point between the restaurant and the guest. And our mission is to help restaurants succeed in their mission of hospitality. So there's a lot in those 2 sentences, like how do we help restaurants succeed? It's about like the bottom line. It's about revenue. It's about, delivering great hospitality, making sure that everything that we're thinking about and building meets that criteria. And then really focusing on that diner restaurant relationship really helps us like focus. There's a lot of times where suggestions for how we can make the product better extend, into like back office or like really into things that don't touch the diner at all. And there's like a point where if it ultimately makes the diner experience better, we'll like go there. But there's definitely like a line where we're like, okay, this is too far,
What's that line?
I think the line is, it's really just if we can't trace it very clearly back to the diner. If we add this product, if we make this change, is it actually going to make the restaurant be able to deliver a better experience to their diner, which then in turn, gives them more revenue, sales, profit margin, whatever it is. And at some point, you're just too many steps removed. It's much more of a back office efficiency thing, you know, and it's not actually going to connect the dots enough. And then, we've primarily really focused on online digital experiences. And now I think that's for us, we're starting to think about how does that broaden, because the touch points with the restaurant and the guest are not just online. Obviously, they're in person too. And so we can't forget about that and how we're helping make that experience better too.
You're not you are like a B2C, back to B company, right? So do you also, obviously I'm sure you sort of, capture data, SEO type data or SEM on website traffic and things for restaurants, but do you also talk to your customers to get insights?
Yeah, definitely. I think the customers is a lot easier because everyone at the company is our customers in a sense. So it's really easy to get that kind of feedback. I think it's also really easy to, you can talk to them and get that sort of feedback, but then we just have so much information as to how diners behave when they're like interacting with the website, when they're placing an order, how they're getting to the website. Are they looking at the menu all the time? Or do they even check out the events page? Do they even care about that? Why is it that they're not, So I think that there's just so much information we have about the end customers. That part's almost the easier part.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Yeah. Have you been able to leverage sort of existing like technologies, like CDP platforms or something to analyze all that? Or did you build something in-house?
We use a couple of different tools. We use Looker. We use something called, and for the diner stuff, interactions, we use something else called Metabase, which is like another platform that collects the interactions that happen like online and how the products are being used. But yeah, those are the two. And then, we pull in data from Google Analytics
I'm
for
sure.
all of the websites and aggregate that.
Google Analytics has so much data. It's insane. Like you can really, if you set it up well. I think the biggest challenge we always had, the restaurant is tying the customer, like the digital customer and the physical sort of person coming in store, like tying those two together is just such a pain in the ass. Like, are you working on that? Is that a problem that you guys are trying to solve?
Yeah, we're thinking about that a lot. And there's a lot. And I think that's where being part of Fiserv is a really important piece of that story and that journey is, they are, and then not just Fiserv, but also with Clover, really have some strong on-premise products, but they're also a payments company. And actually the payment is actually a really interesting way to tie all of that together, both online and offline. And I think that we're in a unique position because we started as an online platform. You get so much more data than from a card on file and who that person is versus, a swipe. You don't really know anything about that person at all. So yes, it is definitely something we're thinking about. It's something like I'm personally spending a lot of my time on, which is really great. It's like I said before, it's really fun for me to have my hands like in the product. I'm sure like everyone that works here like really hates it, but I'm having a blast.
This podcast is brought to you by Meez, the culinary operating system for food professionals. As a chef and restaurant owner for the past 20 years, I was frustrated that the only technology that we had in the kitchen was financial or inventory software. Those are important, but they don't address the actual process of cooking, training, collaboration, and consistent execution. So I decided if it didn't exist, I'd do my best to get it built. So the current and next generation of culinary pros have a digital tool dedicated to their craft. If you're a chef, mixologist, operator, or generally if you manage recipes intended for professional kitchens, Meez is built just for you. Organize, share, prep, and scale your recipes like never before, and get laser-accurate food cost and nutrition analysis faster than you could imagine. Learn more at www.getmeez.com. I'm the same way, by the way. It's like what I love most is products. It's most of what I do. But yeah, it's the tough thing is you're the CEO. So how do you, I feel bad because I'm just asking you a whole bunch of questions for myself, but hopefully other people will. But when you say something and you have an idea, even if it's an idea, your team might just go and run with it, right?
Not as much as you would think. A response I get very often is, oh, well, we'll like go do some research on that. And sometimes I'm like, no. Yeah. I try to be really clear when I feel strongly about something versus when I don't. Have you thought about this? Or have you looked into this? Versus I feel very strongly that it needs to be Y, So yeah, because I've had people run with things that I wasn't that serious about and also not run with things that I was very serious about. So
I have this executive coach, and one thing that we're working on right now is I have this problem because I think that things become ambiguous because I'll have an idea and I'm like, what would be really interesting is da-da-da. And then the team will sort of go and run with it. And so I try more now whenever I'm like in a meeting is I'll, in the beginning, set the expectation whether like, hey, this is something that I want to happen. I want to be clear that this is something we were going to do, or this is just an idea. Let's discuss it, because if I don't, sometimes, that's when trouble arises. Well, it sounds like you're digging into this kind of unified customer data thing right now. Is there anything else that you're really excited about right now?
That, and then this is again a lot of what is like some good that's coming out of, being part of such a large scale company. But there's a lot of really exciting things that we're doing like directly with customers on kind of a larger scale basis. Some of it I can't really talk about, but I feel like I am in a position now with the scale of Fiserv and like the support that we have to be able to do really exciting kind of public facing things with our customers that we weren't really able to do before at the like scale we were at.
Yeah.
So that's really fun.
It's crazy. BentoBox was born because you started designing, a website for Momofuku, and all of a sudden more people were asking for this. And I have to imagine this was not the plan when you first started thinking about, building a website, or maybe it was, but when you launched BentoBox, was your original vision that all of these things that are now happening with Bento would be part of it?
Not when I started, because, I started it in 2013, and really then I was just like, I just want to like do great things for restaurants. It was really just very customer focused, and still is. But I do think that in 2015, when we first took outside capital, I really had to expand the way I was thinking about it, because otherwise you shouldn't take outside capital if you can't think of it that way. So I think that's probably when I started just being like, oh, this could be really big.
Yeah.
I started thinking like, yeah, this actually could be really big. And there's so many directions we could go. But I didn't have a world domination vision in mind. Again, it was always just about like, how can I do really cool things that are actually valuable for restaurants?
Yeah. One thing I've learned more about you as I hear you talk and have listened to your other talks is you can look at a company like BentoBox from the outside and have some really academic conversations about all the things that happened and how they happened. And you seem to have a pretty sort of keep it simple and just do it kind of mentality with things that you do.
Yeah.
That's just an observation. I don't know if that's, we don't know each other that well to know for sure, but
I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for these academic conversations. I'm curious.
Like I think about your talk at First Mark, and talking about how you decide to build something, or any podcast you're on, or just talking about the business. That it's very easy from the outside to look at all the ways in which that decision was made or how you came to that. And sometimes that is the case, and sometimes it's just that you just had an intuition and you did it, and that's what happened. And so I ask some of these questions, I'm okay with if the answer is nope, we just did that. And with that in mind, you have a lot of products now, like a ton, like way more products than when you launched. How do you balance knowing that you need to, horizontally expand, with these customers, you need to add more products so that you can, increase enterprise value and things like that. How do you balance that with the notion of staying focused?
One thing that is really important is that it's very clear to me how like all the dots connect and how every product actually makes the other products, if used together, better, and how complementary they are. They're not random. It's all additive, We haven't always gotten it right. There's definitely products that we've deprecated, that we tried. And I think that's where like the build it fast, do like an MVP type of thing. And not everything is taken off, but you're not going to get to the things that actually are going to become like big valuable products if you don't like take the risk and kind of be okay with getting it wrong sometimes. So
yeah. Fail fast.
Yeah.
You have a design background and you started some companies, but you're not a CFO. You're not a lot of these things. So you had to hire a lot of those people. That's a really tough thing to navigate as well. Hiring, people that have skill sets that you don't have. How do you know what great looks like when you haven't done that? And then also like, how do you ensure they're successful? It's one thing if you hire a CFO or a COO and they just crush it from day one, but what happens if they don't? How do you navigate that? Any learnings or insights along the way? It's been 10 years now. I imagine that you've had, a bunch of ups and downs there.
Yeah, definitely hired a lot of great people, and definitely have hired some not great fits, just to, to keep it neutral. Gosh, yeah, I think it's when you don't know what you're looking for, it's really hard. You have to kind of go off like the person when you don't know what good looks like. And I think that you and me wouldn't be where you are if you didn't have an idea of what good looks like. You might not be able to like write all the bullet points on a piece of paper and like be able to vet them, but you always know. Like anyone that ended up not being a good fit, the reasons were there from the beginning. You just decided that they were like not as important,
Yeah.
all the risks were there. But I think it's all part of the process. I think that one thing that I did a lot is I found experts in those areas that I wasn't good at that were, either referrals from investors or from like friends or other people, and had them talk to the people to like give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or even have them, when someone was struggling, ask them if they could mentor this person and help point them in the right direction, because I sure wasn't going to be able to do that. And people are pretty gracious and willing with their time,
Yeah.
I did that a bunch.
Yeah, that's also one of the why it's so important to have good investors for that, because they can be so helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I find that you can also have a really good person at the wrong time for your business. Or also, I think you do actually have to be really granular about what results do I want out of this person. I think that's a mistake we've made in the past where they're really good, but we actually needed something different, and their superpower is this, and we really need this. And that's, I think, obviously just like lessons learned. But do you remember a time when you hired someone that was really good and then you realized, shit, this is great, but it's not going to work for us?
Yeah, that's definitely happened. I mean, we definitely have hired people who probably would have worked better at a larger scale with resources and lots of, direct reports, doing a bunch of stuff, or they were very structured, and like the size and pace we were at didn't really work for how structured they were. But I do think the thing that I ran into more and was harder was when you brought someone great on and it was actually like perfect timing and it worked for like a year or two. And then the like pace of the company started outpacing like the growth of the person. That to me like happened way more and was like way harder because,
And what do? Do you just find a way for them to move on? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can, depending on the type of person they are, and we've had a few people like this where they're really good 0 to 1 people, and there are other 0 to 1 things happening at the company. And so they could potentially go and like jump on those things. I think that I've done a decent job, like not letting that stuff linger, and I try to like make it so that it's not about the person, about the role. And I think the longer you let it linger, it becomes a problem.
Yeah, you got to get that in the bud.
So yeah, you just have to have the difficult conversations, and they shouldn't be surprised at the difficult conversation. I think it should be like, there should be like a conversation happening regularly about what's going on. So if anyone's ever surprised, then we've communicated badly, or that's what I've learned.
Yeah. I'm always curious because we hire so many chefs at Mies, and we're a technology company, but it actually works really well in many cases. There are times when it really doesn't. But how have you found hiring folks from the industry at BentoBox?
Yeah, I think there's certain roles that they are great for, and they're usually like, customer facing roles. And then I think there's some roles that kind of just need the experience at the technology company. But we've had amazing like success, like hiring people in the restaurant industry into customer support or customer success or onboarding. And then once they've been at the company for a while and they understand how like a technology company operates, moved into like product or operations, and like that path seems to like work really well.
Yeah, I love seeing that. We have a couple chefs that have sort of, grown into other roles, and it's so cool to see because there's so many skill sets that are transferable.
Yeah.
You're hiring front of house, back, all kinds of folks, but just restaurant, Another thing about restaurants, we have the lineup. I know you haven't worked at a bunch, but I'm sure you know a lot about this. There's like the lineup at the beginning of service or just before service, and you get everybody together and talk about the day. In other businesses like ours, we have an all hands, and it's just similar. Just not, the cadence is not daily; it's usually weekly or something. You've had an all hands that I think you've had the same all hands for since inception.
How did you know that?
Right?
Did I talk about that?
You talked about it. You talked about it, and I heard it. So again, I'm being really selfish. I'm just going to be asking you a bunch of questions that are helpful for us. But again, I think they're transferable. How has your all hands changed over time? I'm going to ask you a couple. I'll remind you again if you want. how do you maintain the intimacy of it as your team has grown? And then do you use it as a way to promote your company principles, or is that something that just happens organically?
A lot of people have tried to kill it, many times. And I'm like, it must continue. If you don't like it, you don't have to come.
And it's weekly still. Is it every week?
It's weekly. And I think the things that keep it intimate are the things that like we've kept, which is, it's not just me talking, it's the main thing that we've kept is like this portion that's just all about like gratitude, where everyone goes and thanks someone for something that they've done during that week or that month. Because now it's a little bit extended because now we have like groups. It used to be that everyone had to go every week.
How long is the meeting?
30 minutes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And how many people is it now?
Probably close to 200. And I think up until we were maybe 30 or 40 people, everyone went every week. I mean, you could always opt out. Like I never forced everyone to talk, and then we started going into like splitting it into groups, and now it's kind of split up by function. So for example, I think this week it's like the people team, the BD team, and another team is going this week. And we have a little Slack message. And if you're going to say something at this one, you give a little thumbs up.
Oh, okay. There's like a representative, or anybody from the team.
Anybody, so that, we don't call the names of people who don't want to speak. Yeah. You don't have to. Yeah. Keeping that has been important, even though it's like at times it's been like awkward when we're growing. As we've grown, I think it's every month. So every like fourth or fifth one, it's like, it's an hour long instead of half an hour. And then we go through like real business updates, because we found that people wanted to hear about the business, how the business was going. And I always open the all hands and I just talk about something random that's on my mind, or some experience I had either at a restaurant or with one of our customers, or something that I'm excited about. But then we started hearing that sometimes I talk about our metrics, but not always, but people wanted to like stay connected to the metrics more. And so I started at that all hands doing like a metrics thing every time. And then I was just like, this is not what I want to be talking about here. Yeah. And so we added, there's like a business review now.
What are like the key metrics that you track for your business?
It's really just like the top level ones, like revenue, new customers, cancellations, ARPU. And now that we're part of Fiserv and the world is different. No, I guess we used to look at burn, but now it's about like operating income. Like how much are we actually, what's the bottom line?
When you say burn, like you would just report on burn multiple, or just actual like fixed dollar amount of burn every month?
I think we talked about burn I don't know if back then it was every month. It might have been, it was like 2+ years ago. But at some cadence we would. We wouldn't say how much money we had in the bank, but we would, talk about how much we were spending. And I remember like during the pandemic when we, at the beginning of the pandemic, it was like, everyone's like freaking out. And then it turned out it was like a good time for us. But when everyone was freaking out and we were making sure we scaled back a little bit just to like play it safe. And I really talked people through from like a burn perspective, like why we were scaling back. Because, it was like, if we keep doing what we're doing, like we run out of money on this date and I need to extend it. So like, that's why, this is all happening. People appreciate.
I imagine some of the things that you talk about are, environment or market dependent, but like generally speaking, you have the grateful piece of the all hands. And then is there another evergreen piece of the meeting that happens every week?
Yeah. So usually I kick it off and then we introduce new people a lot. Actually, I should even say that I don't kick it off anymore. And this is something else that changed. Now that we have so many people and people don't, want to get to know each other, there's a host now every time that starts, and it's a different person and they pick their background music. So you kind of get a little bit of, you can start understanding the person through their music choices, and they talk a little bit about themselves in the beginning. And then they like pass
That's
it off to me.
I love that. And, I've heard you talk a lot about your principles. We have first principles at Mies that we constantly try our best to promulgate. And, when you're on board, obviously, you see them and then we have them in other places. But how do you organically or inorganically, promote the principles of your company to your team?
Yeah. Well, I try to drop them in, in any feedback I'm giving or organic ways like that. We do have twice a year, you may have heard me talk about it, we do the principal awards. We just give out the principal awards like twice a year. People are nominated for each principal, give them a little award. When we were like in person, they used to have to wear like a little sash and, to the other person. But now whoever won the principal award from the particular principal, so there was like 9, winners. Whoever won it the year before needs to introduce the person who's winning it this year. It's like a little pass the baton moment. And it's fun. It's great. And people nominate, so everyone's like really a part of it.
That's cool.
So it works well.
I like that. Make a note of that. Okay. We're going to move on a little bit. We've taken up enough of your time just asking how you run things. But so, for the audience, maybe we could talk a little bit about you've been in tech, the food tech world for quite a while now, let's say 10 years. Do you think about, forward thinking, any opportunities you're seeing for like net new technology, innovation, process, specifically in the hospitality industry?
There's a lot. I stay away from like the robot AI kind of replace the person world. I don't really like go down that path. And I always try to think about ways where technology can be like invisible and like more in the background, I think this is probably just like a lame answer because I think it's the really obvious ones, but I do think that, and I know a lot of people are talk about this, but I do think that there's just some way to just help restaurants better with data, like it's just like we all have so much of it and we give them these dashboards and nobody like cares about a dashboard or knows how to read a dashboard. And there just should be some more like insightful, actionable ways to present, to give that to restaurants so they like actually use it where it doesn't even look or feel like data.
I 100% agree. I think like the restaurants don't have data scientists and data analysts and even when they have someone that can read these dashboards, like we need to just give them, output, like how to operationalize this data. And I think about it a lot with these. We do this. We're very like anti-reports and people are asking for the reports. I'm like, you're going to get this in the app in real time. And the thing that you do will help you like figure out how to like price your menu. Great. But like
that's so cool.
Just in time versus just in case, is way, I think is really important. But maybe I can anchor your thought process here. I imagine you have a lot of insights here, but like maybe just thinking about like the future of the digital storefront. Because for all intents and purposes, the website hasn't really changed much in 10 years. You go, there's a menu. Maybe that menu's in the sidebar. Maybe it's on top. You got your menu. You got your about. You got, maybe order your catering, things like that. On the phone, it's the same. It's a little bit harder to navigate. Are there like things that you think about for, just step function changes in how a websites exist?
How websites exist. Wow. There's a lot of times where I had to like, and I know this is not what you're asking, defend the website's existence, And I was like, it's going to be replaced by apps. I'm like, it's not going to be replaced by apps, because especially not for restaurants, but they just like really like, they care so much about the experience. There's no way they're going to give that up. But I think that one like opportunity is really like with how do we make like SMS like feel like a lot, I know this is like, do you really have to go to the website or can you just like text someone, and it's like, we're doing it like all the time anyway, I think that's a really interesting idea. And how can it be done in a way that feels like you're almost like a regular, or it feels like you have some like connection with the restaurant and the way the tone, everything feels like the restaurant. But I think that's one potential opportunity. But I do think that the website can really, we think about it as something that happens like before you, like when you're not at the restaurant to get like information or if you want to like buy or order something for the restaurant. But I do think that there's ways where it can play a bigger role in the actual on-premise experience in a way that doesn't take away from the on-premise experience, but just like really enhances it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one thing I think about, the caveat here is accept cookies, because if you don't, you have some problems. But, if you go to 11 Madison Park, they know my grandmother's birthday and they know that my wife's anniversary was 2 weeks ago. And, they remembered last time it was raining and they gave me an umbrella and, they remember all these things about you. And it's just accretive to the experience. And I think that probably could be even easier when I go to their website and I go to Coat and I don't actually know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of like, I think I want to book a table and they're like, hey, your wedding anniversary is in 2 weeks. Or I saw that you were looking at it. And like when I get to that website, it's actually like for me, I think that's possible. And especially with this data that you're working on, of like how do you, unify the customer data. I'm curious if you ever think about like how do you personalize these websites? Because I agree that I don't think they should go away because they are the storefront. And let's just say I go to 50 restaurants. That means I have 50 apps on my phone. That's crazy. So like how do we personalize like these websites?
Yeah. When we think about personalization, and I think from like, if you got like a personalized like email or text message, you'd be like, cool. I think if you went to a website that was like personalized, I think because it's so, no one is looking at it except you, but the website is like somewhere anyone can go versus your email or your text message. And I think that there's some perception that like a line has been crossed because it feels public, even though it's not. Think about that. Like you would probably be like, my anniversary. But then if you go to the website, does everyone know my anniversary? Which is obviously not what's going on, But there's something like, I think it's so walking the line of additive and not creepy. I think with this data is so important. And I think it's like these little things like that of like how the human brain thinks that you just have to like.
Yeah, I feel like that could be solved with UX. Like you have a thing on the bottom that says accept cookies.
Yeah.
Like, which by the way, I think that's a terrible experience because it's just ruined. Every time I go to a website, I have to do it. I'm like, okay, my first experience is this and it has no fault to the website. But you can skate around it. But like if you got to the website
you gotta do it.
And there was a door, it says like, hey, do you want to come in personally? And we can, and no, I just want to like do my thing or, and we can create this experience or not. And then you actually sort of, circumvent just the main website, even though it's the same thing and kind of get to this personal experience. I do think, you need to, you set some context because if I just get to this thing that anybody else can also get to and all this information about me, like, whoa, what happened? But
yeah, that's a cool idea. I like that.
Well, speaking of that, although I actually do think it's a cool idea. Maybe I'll send you a note about that. But right now, you're digging a bunch into customer data, but it's now 10 years since you started BentoBox. You have more resources now since you've been acquired by Fiserv. I'm going to have to remind myself. I want to either at least remind everybody in the show notes what Fiserv is, or maybe we can talk about it for a minute just so everybody's aware. But if you were going to start another business today, do you know what it would be? Or would you just not start one? Or
I don't think I would start a venture back business again, or like in the stage that I'm at, like that's not something I'm like jumping at the opportunity to do. I mean, maybe if something comes to me, but I do think if I was going to start something, I want to do something that's much more like a brand, a brick and mortar, just something a lot more physical.
Interesting.
Than what I've been doing. That's where my mind goes. I don't have any sort of idea. I'm not like working on anything.
Why not a venture-backed business?
I just like ending on a high note. It was a great run. I learned all the things. It was very specific, it's a very specific experience. And it's not one that I'm like jumping at again. I feel like I took everything I needed from that experience as a human. And I'm not sure if it has any more to give me.
But you're at towards the end of the road trip. I'm more towards the beginning. And I think you quickly learn what that means to be a venture-backed business. And I think the thing that I didn't fully appreciate, which I appreciate in terms of the makeup of what it means, but for anybody looking for venture capital, it is meant for outsized returns, not for anything in between. So just creating a simply profitable business is fine, but not for venture. And, you have to take big risks and you have to, be okay with, which is something you need in any business, but, it needs to be a risk with an outsized return. And if it doesn't have an outsized return, then it's not really of interest to venture. And venture is a great instrument for raising capital, but I think a lot of people aren't aware of that when they get into it, is that you can create a really good business that still isn't meant for venture capital if it's not growing the way that you need to grow. And then that then creates a cycle as the CEO of continually making sure that you're having these sort of outsized growth spurts and things like that. And yeah, I think that I asked you why, because I think, some folks, I get, you probably do as well. Every week I have someone asking me like advice on how to raise cash. And first thing I always ask them is like, why do you want cash and what do you want to do with it? And what kind of business do you have? And, venture, anytime a restaurant asks me, I'm like, don't get venture capital. There's no reason for that. And they probably won't invest anyways. But
the type of person that I am, I took the commitment to like raising outside capital and the expectation that came with it. Some people take it and, are still somehow able to be like, this is like my show and this thing doesn't, matter. But I took my commitment to taking that money into my investors and to people on my cap table very, very seriously. I was incapable of not taking it seriously. And so, it's just a particular dynamic. And some people don't take it as seriously. And I think that is very powerful and cool for them.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And I think it's interesting because once you do understand the makeup of what the expectations of venture capital, when you do take it seriously, it just creates a new paradigm. I totally agree. I come from the restaurant world where we have restaurant investors and that cash it's a cash flow business and you got to pay back that cash. And I think of it the same exact way. And in venture, it just means you're not just paying back that cash. You need to make sure it's paying back the fund, that you have a 10x multiple on your, on your fund. So it's just a different approach. I love it, but I think I want to make sure people are, aware of the dynamic when you do it. Well, when you think of what the next business is, you let us know. Do you think about like where BentoBox is going to be in 10 years? What kind of a company it's going to be? It's already gone. Like, think about the last 10 years. It's like night and day. What's 10 years from now?
Who knows? I'm very just focused on kind of the more near term future, and being trusting that's like the right direction of bringing this whole like diner experience, both online and on premise together. Like that's like really important. But I don't know where that road's going to lead, and I think that's better.
Yeah.
I think it's better to leave it.
That's true. Open. We also don't know how the world's going to change in 10 years. That probably will affect some of the things.
Totally.
Anything else you want to share? The audience is primarily restaurant, hospitality, entrepreneurs, food folks.
If that's the audience, I'm always like so grateful. I get to work with such a great industry, and if any of our customers are ever listening, that a big thank you for trusting us, with your most important relationships. And it's my pleasure to be able to like serve this industry that's always taking care of everyone else.
Well, thank you for building such an incredible company that so many people get value out of. This was great. We could have talked about 100 things, but I think you have a business to run, as do I. So we'll stop here. But thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thanks. It was so good catching up. That's what I felt like it was, which is great.
Thanks for tuning into the Mies podcast. The music from the show is a remix of the song Art Mirror by an old friend, hip-hop artist, Fresh Daily. For show notes and more, visit getmees.com/podcast. That's GETMEEZ.com/podcast. If you enjoyed the show, I'd love it if you can share it with fellow entrepreneurs and culinary pros, and give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Keep innovating, don't settle, make today a little bit better than yesterday, and remember, it's impossible for us to learn what we think we already know. See you next time.